Sorry, are you guys getting that?
Today to our panel on democratic education, friends or foes. And I would like to begin by giving you the regrets of Benjamin Barber, who, because of the problems that he was having with traveling and snow and where he need to be next, was unable to get to us here today. Um, ever since I moved to Washington, D.C., um, I've watched with some fascination the way in which natives of this district go into a moral panic over the thought of snow. Um, so I'm very grateful for those of you who turned out today. That unlike your fellow district residents, you figured you could go out when the snow wasn't going to arrive for another 8 hours. So I'm sure I've insulted all those district residents watching this on live streaming. Let me tell you that our next conversation will be on March 12th. Same place, same channel. It will be on the future of teacher preparation and teacher education. We have a really top-notch panel that will include Deborah Ball, who's the Dean of the School of Education at the University of Michigan, Michael Foyer, who's the Dean of the School of Education here at George Washington and part of the National Academy of Education. Claire Sylvan, who's running a very interesting alternative preparation program in New York as part of the Internationals network, and Kate Walsh of the National Council on Teacher Equality. We urge you all to turn out for that. My last duty here this morning is the best duty, which is to introduce Rick Kallenberg. Rick is a member of the Albert Schweitzer Board of Directors, but that's probably the least of his qualifications for the job that he has agreed so kindly to take on this morning. He is the author of the definitive biography of Al Shanker, Tough Liberal. And he has been, I think, probably the leading exponent in the United States of the importance of economic integration in education, why it is important that we bring together students from different socioeconomic classes. So without any further ado, let me turn the program over to Rick.
Great, thanks very much, Leo, for that kind introduction. Many of you are probably disappointed that Benjamin Barber is not here, and I'm disappointed, but we have a terrific panel, and I think that Rick Hess and Joanne Barkin will have plenty of opinions and ideas to fill the space here. Joanne is a contributing writer at Dissent and wrote a really groundbreaking story that many of you may have seen a few years ago called "How Billionaires Rule Our School." And one of the striking aspects of her piece is that she cites her fellow panelist Rick Hess from the American Enterprise Institute and his notable book, With Best of Intentions, How Philanthropy is Reshaping K-12 Education. So I'm not sure, but this is probably the first and last time that a democratic socialist publication cited an American Enterprise Institute scholar. But we have something interesting going on here, some strange bedfellows, and I think it'll make for a good discussion. So Leo asked me to say just a few words at the beginning to frame the discussion, and then we'll hear primarily from Joanne and Rick. And my starting point on this topic of philanthropy and democratic education is, as is true on most education topics, Al Shanker. And given that this is the Albert Shanker Institute that's sponsoring the forum, hopefully I can get away with this. As Leo mentioned, I wrote a biography, Tough Liberal, now out in paperback. And in this, I describe Al Shanker's views on education and how democracy was really at the center of everything that he stood for and fought for. So he was for trade unions because he believed they were critical for democracy. An enormous supporter of public education because public schools are the cornerstone of American democracy. It was a rare speech where he did not mention democratic values in some fashion. And so if we look to what Al Shanker said about foundations and democracy, he did have some thoughts. And I'm just going to quote briefly from one passage in the book. So those of you who know about Al Shanker's history in the New York City schools, he was at war in some ways with the Ford Foundation in the late 1960s, when Ford was supporting community control of schools in Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and elsewhere, and there was an enormous series of teacher strikes, a lot of conflict over that issue. And reflecting on that, Al Shanker raised some questions about the role of foundations in education policy in a democracy. He was so angered by the Ford Foundation's role in funding and supporting community control that he launched a nationwide speaking tour on the topic. He argued that foundations exercise immense power in a way that was completely unaccountable, quote, responsible neither to elected public officials nor to stockholders. He worried that they would distort the public debate because academics who rely on foundation support might feel inhibited to criticize foundations for fear of jeopardizing future support. And by dispensing their money, these foundations were able to create a built-in political lobby to support their special tax status. And Shanker actually was part of a group that in 1969 testified before the House Ways and Means Committee on tax-exempt organizations. And the upshot was the Tax Reform Act of 1969, which sought to kind of rein in the power of foundations and their political activities in particular. So that's on the one hand. Then on the other hand, Al Shanker was someone who supported the role of independent organizations in fledgling democracies and in our own. He thought it was important that there be power centers apart from the government, so that whether they be trade unions or philanthropic organizations. And later in his life, he served on the boards of the Spencer Foundation and the what was then the 20th Century Fund, the organization for which I work, now called the Century Foundation. So these are complicated issues, and I'm looking forward to our discussion of them.